Hey, welcome on to Mox with FP Wellman. I am Fred Wellman, the host of the show. This week's show comes on a wave of crazy news. My God, Trump's battling in court to avoid, any accountability for what he does. Ohio voters told the GOP to get in Lake Erie. Ron DeSantis is flexing his authoritarian muscles once again just to try and save his pathetically dying presidential campaign. You know, it's just been one thing after another. And I got an incredible guest to discuss all of this and much more. So let's not waste any of our time. Let's get right to it. Right. Welcome back. There's a little brief musical pause there. I'm still Fred Wellman, even after the music. And this is on Democracy with me, FP Wellman. There's a few people on the internet that I rely on all the time to keep me focused and informed of what's going on in the dark reaches of the right, the news world, all the MAGA industrial complex, if you will. And one of those, of course, is Aaron Rupar. And Aaron, it just turns out, he gets us the moments we need to see, but also the analysis we need to know. So I'm thrilled to have Aaron join the show. Aaron's a journalist immersing himself in the madness of the far right every day, broadcasting the lunacy for you all to see. Former politics and policy editor at Vox, associate editor of Think Progress. Now you host your own podcast, the aptly named Aaron Rupar Show, and your fast-growing Substack, Public Notice, which I'm a paid subscriber to, Aaron, I have you know.
Thank you.
It's good to be. Welcome to the show, man. I'm glad to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My pleasure.
This is great. We've been hanging out on Twitters for so long. The thing I love with this show, so if you haven't caught the show before, one of my jokes I've been making since, nobody watched us before, right, Matt? But people actually watch the show now, was that I really just do this show to talk to cool people. And so that's why, I was like, I got an excuse to talk to them, Now people watch. It's really cool. So welcome to MeidasTouch Network. Welcome to have you. I guess we start off because we're, it's been an interesting week just politically, right? The Ohio results came out. The crazy situation, right, where they tried to jam in an August election and frame it. But I think did you see some of the crazy stuff they were trying to spin to stop things? And for those who don't know, I guess we'll start there. Is that Ohio just had issue 1, special election, basically trying to make it nearly impossible to put something on their ballot initiative. And it failed miserably. I mean, what's your thoughts on this? You just see that you watched that campaign unfold, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it shows that every single time Republicans put abortion on the ballot in one form or another, they're losing. And,
right.
I even saw just before we hopped on this call that Ann Coulter is kind of the voice of reason out there saying, they'll figure this out maybe before every single elected Republican loses. But it's just a losing issue for them. And, I'm kind of one thing I thought that was interesting along these lines is I watched Trump's speech yesterday in New Hampshire, and there was a whole lot of crazy in that. I mean, it reminded me a lot actually of his 2016 speeches with calling Christie a fat pig and calling Gillum a crackhead and, all of this really kind of crude and low stuff. But he got to the part of the speech, and this is kind of a part of his normal speeches now, about abortion. And he kind of prefaced what he said by saying, this is a big problem for Republicans, and here's how I need to talk about it. And, kind of coaching his audience almost to talk about it in terms of this gives pro-life people a chance to negotiate, kind of walking back from some of the more incendiary or trying to restrict rights rhetoric that, certain Republicans use around this issue. Yeah. So even he seems to understand that this is really a big political liability. But, Ohio, DeWine, the governor there, won by 20 points recently. Yeah. And, this ballot measure went down by about 20 points. And so it shows that to the extent that, Democrats can make 24, especially in 24, can make this next election cycle about reproductive rights. It really seems to be a winning issue for them and a losing issue for Republicans. And, even more so, I think, given that this was an August kind of off cycle. I mean, I maybe in some ways that makes drawing conclusions kind of more difficult because I'm not quite sure if the right interpretation is that more energizes the pro-choice people, or if that energized the anti-choice people. I'm not quite sure on that, but the fact that it went down so resoundingly, I think, is very significant. And then, another thing I'll just note on this is that the Ohio Secretary of State was on Fox and Friends this morning. He was one of the architects of this issue 1, as it's called in Ohio. Yeah. And he was very defiant, kind of saying we've lost this battle, but the war is just starting and we'll be back. And so, as we sit here and talk about some of the lessons from this and talk about how this is a really bad issue for Republicans, it seems like they can't help themselves, that they just are going to keep going back to this well. And so I guess Democrats should feel good about that because now we have, the 2022 cycle. We've had a number of special elections, now this referendum in Ohio. the evidence just keeps mounting that this is a really bad issue for Republicans.
Yeah, and the thing is, they're going to learn the lesson too that we're really good at nationalizing these races now, right? This became, I was involved in it, through Blue Ohio, one of my partner organizations I work with, and people are focusing. It's just they keep stepping on this rake, and it was funny seeing them last night on the one of the president of the Senate, I think, was on TV last night saying, well, we just didn't have time to get ready. Everybody's like, dude, it was your idea. I mean, literally, what the hell are you talking about? The whole thing was your idea. They literally passed a law last year saying August special elections should be outlawed. They ignored that and ran an August special election because they're terrified of the issue coming up, because they want to stop the abortion issue coming on the ballot in November. So they're going to get a second drink for this in November, but clearly the anti forces are mobile. And I saw it last night. I was on a call. We had a group call for Blue Ohio, which is my partner David Pepper, who's a former guest of the show and runs Blue Ohio. And man, Nancy Pelosi showed up, Gavin Newsom showed up, Jamie Harrison showed up. I mean, this is an issue. And when you've got a state where Biden lost by 8 points 3 years ago, and now this issue loses by 14 3 years later. I mean, and you're right. They just don't get it. I mean, and it gets to this fact. They just don't seem to listen. And that transitions nicely into the fact, let's go back to what you said, segue back to what you said about Trump's derangement. I mean, it just feels like they've all hitched their ride to this guy, right? They're no matter, literally what Marjorie Taylor Greene yesterday said, if he's in jail, I'm voting for him, right? I mean, oh yeah. But does he seem, like you said, you touched on it a little bit earlier, does he seem more deranged than Lou? I mean, or is it a new playing the hits? I mean, it is almost
playing the hits. It's really more playing the hits.
Yeah.
I would say that there's an element now with his speeches where they're so he's so wrapped up in his own legal problems now that's right. Like a huge chunk of his speech. And it does kind of dovetail with a lot of the other issues that he likes to talk about, the deep state, draining the swamp. So like, it's not kind of like out there on an island by itself. But, I think if you were, if you were someone who had been, in a coma for 8 years and you had followed politics before that and you were thawed out and now, dropping in to watch the Republican frontrunner give his campaign speech, I mean, you would be so confused by the fact that okay, he's indicted and that's all he's talking about. He's not even really talking about issues, but people love this and he's dominating. It's very confusing. And I think, we have to kind of keep focus on the fact that I don't think this is going to play well in a general, not that people should be complacent or get overconfident, but I think the things that play well in a Republican primary are not going to play well, in a general election. I think if anything, Trump's appeal should be even less than it was in 2020. So yeah, I mean, on your question, his speech is really, this is kind of something I think people don't always appreciate about Trump, is that really you can go back to 2018. His speeches basically from 2018 to now, so what are we at, 5 years? Yeah. Have barely changed, because the same accomplishments he was talking about in 2018 in terms of the economy, African-American unemployment, things like this. I mean, it's the same stuff that he's talking about 5 years later, with the addition of his legal problems, which are, I guess in 2018 it was more the Mueller stuff, which kind of was the placeholder for that.
Russia.
Right. So yeah, I mean, that's always kind of been a constant. The content of it has changed a little bit, but the thing that kind of struck me again, and I kind of mentioned this earlier with his speech yesterday in New Hampshire, was just how how crude he is, just insulting people. I mean, he was spreading rumors about Fannie Willis's sex life, saying that she had an affair with a gang member. And then I saw, so that tidbit came from a Daily Beast report. And I saw one of the reporters who was involved in reporting that, he's talking about something completely different, where she has, in her role professionally, has been involved with prosecution of gang members and things like that. And there's allegations that they've gone, they've gotten off light, sort of thing. Somehow Trump twists that into having a sexual affair, which kind of shows where his mind goes with stuff like this. And of course, he's always had trouble with black women, going back years and years now. If not, you can go all the way back to with his problems with black people to the Central Park Five, things like that. But so I was more, I guess, then another point on that is that, in 2016, when Trump was out there saying McCain isn't a war hero, or mocking the reporter with a disability, those were huge stories. Those were multiple day news cycles. Everybody was talking about it. Republicans had to weigh in on it. Now he calls Chris Christie a fat pig. He basically, says that Fannie Willis is a slut without any evidence at all. And it's just kind of it's just Trump being Trump. So it's notable to me how we've become kind of numb to all of that. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, again, I don't think that really, it doesn't bode well for him in terms of returning to the White House, but that aspect of it, the fact that we just had, his speeches are just tuned out now in a way that they weren't. And maybe that's just a novelty wearing off, but that part of it is notable to me.
Yeah, I agree. And you, that's one of the reasons I want to bring it up to you. So you I don't know how you do it, by the way. Just get that out of the way. How the hell do you do it? I mean, just... did you have hair when you started? Tell me the truth. Yeah, you had hair, didn't you?
No, I did. I mean, actually, the lack of hair was a COVID thing where, when COVID hit, I had a little barbershop in DC that I used to go to. And of course, that didn't seem wise, when everybody was basically quarantined. Yeah. And so I just started shaving my own head, and the hair was thinning a little bit anyway. Like, it wasn't too bad, but it was kind of like, maybe it's time. And I just never, I'm married, so it's like, my wife doesn't seem to mind. I hope she's not.
And Keisha from pulling it up. That's why I kept my hair short in the Army. It wasn't.
No,
so
but
much,
you should really, because you should talk to your new colleague Asen about because Trump lately, a lot of his speeches are they're in the evenings and they're on the weekends. Right. A lot of them. Right. And I have two little kids.
You have a life. Yeah.
So there was basically from 2017 through basically a couple months ago, I had watched every single Trump rally speech that he had given, sometimes on a short delay. If I had something going on, I'd watch them later in the evening or, whatever. But now it's there's a lot of them now. And again, they're very similar. He's not the president anymore. So if they're chanting lock her up, I don't know, I guess it's newsworthy because he's a Republican frontrunner, but anyway, Asen has kind of taken that mantle. I feel where he is reliably, if it's a Saturday night, he's on, tweeting the Trump rally, and I take a buy on some of them now. But the one yesterday was kind of in the sweet spot because it was mid-afternoon. So it's kind of a weird one where it wasn't his usual evening thing. Yeah.
Well, God bless you. I went the opposite direction. I grew mine out to discovered I have curls. I'm not sure if I think I had waves. I thought I had waves. And then somewhere halfway through the pandemic, I discovered I had curls. Anyway, here I am now with these luscious curls. No, I get it. And I haven't pulled them out because of that. I think I keep my distance a little bit more than you guys do. And it's fantastic. And it is a service. That's what I love about talking to you when I reach out to you. It's and you find things that nobody else is finding, and I appreciate that. But the legal troubles really are eating up his brain, right? I mean, it's like there's this empty echo going on in his head. All he can talk about is legal. I think Liz Dye did a guest piece on your Substack today about the Trump lawyer show. I mean, it has really been, what a freaking clown car of lawyers, and they're trying to, I don't know. I mean, who are they trying this for, do you think? Is it to keep raising money so they get paid? By the way, that's my working theory, is they're going on TV. Here's my working theory. My working theory is they go on TV, say this crazy stuff that's completely farcical and will never pass the legal judgment because they want to get paid. I mean, their audience is not anybody but one guy in Florida who's, watching TV obsessively.
Yeah. Well, and Liz's piece actually went into a lot of detail that I was not aware of before she, I edited it, but she kind of traces the through line, because we can think back on the first Trump, his first impeachment. Granted, he had Dershowitz was one of his legal members, but he did have some lawyers that had some real credibility and are real attorneys. When he was president. But then, basically when the January 6th happened, the efforts to overturn the election, that was really kind of a turning point where a lot of serious law firms no longer wanted to be associated with him because it's obviously really bad for their brand. Yeah. And so now it's kind of this clown car of Alina Habba and this John Lauro guy. And actually, Liz is probably writing something next week on John Lauro is the guy who's been doing all these TV hits recently. Yep. I noticed that now they have a different attorney who I had never heard of before, who was on CNN the other night, because I think the Lauro ones were so bad, because first of all, he doesn't really have any charisma for TV. So he's just kind of this non-entity on TV. But then, a lot of the things that he was saying just did not make any sense. And then one of Jack Smith's filings in the January 6th case actually cited at length a number of his TV hits, making the government's case. And so she's going to go into that there's still a ruling pending on that. So when the ruling comes down, that'll be a nice news peg for that. Yeah. But anyway, so the point being he not only does he have kind of the same cast of characters, Christina Bobb being another one, these attorneys who are not particularly well established or reputable. Yeah. But then beyond that, a lot of these attorneys are representing numerous figures in Trump world, right? Some of whom have obvious conflicts of interest where some of them have evidence that implicates other members of Trump world, and they're representing both of these clients. And so it's become very incestuous in that way too. but it's all kind of a byproduct of he can't really tap into like good attorneys at this point. And so it's the same ones over and over. And then, because he wants to keep basically his henchmen on side with him, he'll offer to pay for their legal representation, but it's the same lawyer representing another witness who's incriminating this, so it's just a very problematic arrangement that he has.
Yeah.
But anyway, in terms of like what you were saying, I think a lot of it, like when these attorneys go on Fox News or Newsmax or like OAN, I mean, they're speaking to the base. They're kind of giving them, they're not giving really a legal defense. It's more of a political defense. Here are talking points to defend Trump with. I don't understand why they go on CNN or MSNBC. I mean, those appearances never go well.
No.
Like I mentioned in this filing from the Jack Smith team, they create additional legal problems in some instances.
Yeah.
Their base voters aren't watching.
No.
So that's me. It's like, I don't know if it's just like a vanity thing or what's going on there, but that's been go on for years now, where these attorneys, like especially Ari Melber on MSNBC, he's got like this cottage industry. Like the other day he had an attorney who was representing John Eastman on there.
Oh, he dismantled him.
And and they never go well because, they don't really have good arguments.
No.
Even if they were the most skilled orators and attorneys in the world, like they don't really have good material to work with. So that to me, I wish I could answer that question for you. I've been wondering that myself. It's like, why do these guys go? I understand the Fox and the Newsmax. I don't get the CNN and the MSNBC, but it's been such a pattern that there's got to be some rationale for it. I don't understand what it is.
I'm an old Lincoln Project guy. I think it's Trump. We used to say that a lot, that a lot of people are just playing for one audience. We saw that a lot in Trump world during the campaign. Talking to Rick Wilson, my colleagues there at the Lincoln Project I used to work with, that was something we talked about a lot, is that a lot of times people are simply playing for one guy, one audience, because he's so domineering, he's so aggressive and pushing people. You will do it, and then they just all meekly go along. But you know why? I mean, is it Christina Bobb or Alina Haba, the one that made $2 million in that last FEC report? I mean, $2 million will buy you a lot of lying on TV, I guess. I mean, it just, and so they gotta get the bills paid, I guess. But you're right, it is just a clown show, and I'm a big believer. I love it. Keep talking. You know what I mean? Yeah. I say, hey, you're doing great. Keep it up, guys. I mean, just the idea that the guy who's prosecuting is using your lawyer's public statements and just filing is, I think it's awesome myself. But then again, I'm biased.
Yeah. Well, and again, like, so this Loro guy was doing the rounds. He was the guy. Maybe you noticed this because he was on like every single Sunday show this past week.
Did the fight? He did the
entire circuit. And then this week, they had a Trump lawyer on CNN, and it was a different one, and that came after this filing that I mentioned. The filing actually cited a lot of his Sunday show hits. And so I don't know if that was even like too much for Trump, like we got to get someone else in there to do damage control or what was going on. But I mean, that's, generally you would think that if you have a strong defense, you would kind of let that speak for itself, but they feel this need to get out there and spin. And it is a unique situation where Trump is running for president, obviously. Yep. And so they have to fight in the court of public opinion somewhat. Like they can't, just kind of retreat from that.
Yeah.
But none of these defenses are particularly compelling, because the other thing is that, especially with the January 6th indictment, Jack Smith literally on the second page of the indictment says Trump had every right to lie and even to falsely claim that he won the election. Like he sets it up right at the beginning. Like this is not what he's being prosecuted for. Then it goes on to detail how what he's being prosecuted for is this conspiracy to disenfranchise voters, take away their votes. But that hasn't stopped, whether it's Republicans defending Trump or Trump's legal team or Trump himself from trying to frame this as, they're violating my free speech. I'm being prosecuted for political speech, which is the most protected form of speech. And it's like, that is dealt with like literally in the second page. Like if you read even the first 2 pages of the indictment, and it's not a very long indictment, it's like 40 pages. It's like a pretty easy read, but even if you only read the first 2 pages, like it's dealt with right away. And, and it goes to, I think they're banking on, which is probably an accurate bet, that Republicans are not going to read the indictment, and they will believe whatever, Trump's lawyers or Trump himself or these other elected Republicans tell them, or Fox News hosts tell them about it. And that's good enough. And so that is just kind of unfortunate, because I think, if people did take the time to read it, granted, they're so primed to believe now by Trump that every investigation of him is a witch hunt and a persecution, that, maybe that's just maybe that bubble is just impossible to puncture at this point. I'm not sure, but
I would argue that I hate to say it, it works, right? Because if you see mainstream media is forced to repeat those talking points. Right. And you saw that everybody likes to bash New York Times. I love New York Times pitch bot. But you look at the New York Times headlines, they're by the consistent, and I'm an old PR guy, so and I used to be a propagandist for the Army, of course. And it's a consistent repeat the message. The mainstream media has no choice, because when they have to do the both sides, they know they have to do the both sides thing. They have to. And the other side of that is complete lies, right? Yeah. And so they repeat the lies, and it works. I mean, if you look at things, I saw something interesting the other day. A Gallup poll came out, I think it was Gallup, that said 41% of Americans believe that the Biden administration is unethical. Yeah. Okay. You're like, I mean, I've dealt with these guys. They're almost ethical to the point of being uncomfortable because you can't do shit with them, right? But again, that's that constant drip of the messaging slipping into the mainstream, slipping into the conversation. I think it is. It goes back to one guy. I think and he says it all the time. Steve Schmidt, Steve Bannon, flood the zone with shit. Yeah, and you're right. Shit. I mean, certainly, like if you, I posted a tweet last night noting this, that I went through and searched all the transcripts on Fox News Primetime, which, they just changed the lineup. It's Laura Ingraham, Jesse Waters, Hannity, and then they have Gutfeld as like the comedian at the end, who does great ratings, which I guess is another sign of the apocalypse. Right? Exactly. But no, so Hunter Biden was mentioned on those shows last night 47 times. The Ohio referendum was not mentioned. Funny. And that's kind of like, but you're right that it does kind of break through, because even on one of the Sunday shows, I believe it wasn't Goldman, but it was maybe it was Raskin, who was on CBS, the Face the Nation. He went on after the Trump lawyer, and Major Garrett was hosting the show. And so they talked a little bit, because of course Raskin was one of the lead members of the January 6th committee and was like, intimately involved with all of that. And so he had, front row seat, and they were talking about that. But then, the second part of the interview was all these kind of like weird questions about Hunter Biden and, do you have concerns about ethics in the Biden administration, corruption, sort of, but when right-wing media hammers this stuff so hard, right, it does become, and then now Fox is really big on shaming the other networks for not covering their conspiracy theories. And it works. Graphic. Yeah, and it works. And it works. It works like a champ. I mean, and it actually works. It's insanity. And that's a good place to take a break. We'll go talk to some of our amazing sponsors that power this show. It's midsummer. We can see the end of vacation season coming. Back to school, back to business, back to work. It's so easy to get caught up in what everyone else needs from you right now, and you never take a moment to think about what you need from yourself. I see this in my own life as I juggle my work and my family and the time, and heck, even my garden, for goodness sake. Because so many of us spend so much of our time giving to others, it can leave us feeling stretched, thin, burned out, and frankly frazzled. Therapy can give you the tools to find more balance in your life, so you can keep supporting others without leaving yourself behind. I have personally found therapy is helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries, and generally how to become the best version of myself. I want you to know that therapy isn't just for those who've experienced major life difficulties or challenges. It's for everyone. And because what you're going through every day, it matters. If you're thinking of starting therapy, I'd love you to give BetterHelp a try. Now, it's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. I started my own therapy journey online, and I'm going to be honest, it changed my life. With BetterHelp, you just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And you can actually switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. I want you to find more balance in your life, and I want you to find BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/Fred today. You'll get 10% off your first month with BetterHelp. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Fred. And I really, really want to thank BetterHelp for being a sponsor of our show. And back. That's the thing is they've done a great job of shaping the narrative. And that takes us, that's a good place to kind of, the other narrative that's going on right now, the Republican primary, which I think the narrative in the Republican primary, if I was going to pick a narrative that's the biggest bullshit narrative of the Republican primary, is that there's a Republican primary. You know what I mean? Right? Come on. They're all at 1%. And I'll tell you my working theory that other than Christie and Hurd, people hit God all the time on Twitter. I'm sure you get the same stuff. It's like, what are these people doing? Why won't they criticize Trump? They're never opposed him. They're running it. And I tell people all the time, I said it so many times now, I'm almost sick of saying it. None of these guys are actually opposing Trump. Their mission is succeed Trump. They're trying to be his successor. They're all not playing to be the king. They're playing to be the crown prince. The hope that his heart gives out from all the freaking McDonald's, and or he goes to jail and is forced out of the race. I don't know if you disagree, but I'd love your take on that. But that's my working theory is that they don't want to offend MAGA because their theory is they need to be the one that takes them forward. They're actually not opposing Trump.
I think there's a lot to that, especially with like Tim Scott and Haley, who I think Haley in particular would happily be the VP. Scott, maybe, being a senator to go to being the VP, maybe he, like you were saying, maybe he would view himself then as the 2028. Yeah. Kind of like the person waiting, to run then. But, it's a really I was thinking about this today because it's such a difficult needle to thread in the sense of how do you draw a contrast with Trump if you're one of these Republicans and not alienate a significant part of his base, which you need to win the primary. Yep. And, because I thought for many months, and this was kind of naive, I'm not a Republican, but I thought the case for DeSantis that would have made the most sense and really, would have really drawn a sharp contrast would have been basically saying look, I won by 20 points last year in Florida. This guy lost in 2020, and he even went to the extent of trying to overthrow the election to stay in power. Let's go with the winner. He's a loser, just kind of drawing that basic contrast of I am your best hope of winning this next election. But he could never quite bring himself to go there. And, he's kind of hinted at it in a couple recent interviews. It's probably too late now anyway. Yep. But, I just wonder if, if you could have created the perfect anti-Trump Republican candidate in a lab. Yeah. If it even would have been possible to beat him this cycle, because you still have it's probably over half of the Republican base just loves this guy and they're cult members. And he gets indicted, his poll numbers go up, which he talks about, but is true. Yeah. And so I just don't really know if it was even possible. And granted, it's very disappointing because I remember, and I'm sure you do too, back in 2015, those early debates were must watch TV. The first Republican debate where Trump went after Megyn Kelly, that was when after the debate, he said something about her having blood coming out of her, referring to her being, menstrual or whatever. But, they were, must watch it. And Trump took part in all of them. He was sparring with, it was Christie and Rubio in one of them. Yep. But they'd go after each other. And it was, it was entertaining, at least. Granted, it was also pretty bleak in hindsight when reflecting on everything. A little dystopian, slightly dystopian. It was kind of, at the little do we know now. It's like a prequel to the Hunger Games at this point. It was a novelty because we all thought Hillary was going to ultimately prevail, right? So did she. But now, Trump has been very clear. He hasn't come quite out and said it directly, but he's not going to debate this upcoming Fox News debate. He's not going to do it. He's not showing up. And so, it's going to be really sad because, everybody's still going to. It'll still do really good ratings, I'm assuming. I don't know, maybe not, but people you yourself, myself will watch at least because we're. But obsessed. It's going to be what's the point? None of these guys have a shot. No. Christie will be criticizing Trump, and I'm sure, we'll get kind of the perverse spectacle of people like DeSantis and Scott kind of acting as Trump defense attorneys, even when he's not there kind of thing. It'll be very bizarre to see. But then I guess the one thing that we will see now, I'm thinking through this, is that we will at least get the spectacle, since DeSantis will presumably still be the number 2 candidate at that time, of people ganging up and attacking him, which could be kind of entertaining. Because I feel like that's, as bleak as the Trump thing is, the one fate has kind of given us the silver lining, or they've at least thrown us the bone of this DeSantis implosion, which has been so entertaining and delicious to take in. Because some of these people, Christina Pushaw is one of the just most reprehensible people on Twitter. Oh, terrible! Just find her to be totally insufferable. So the fact that Jeremy Redfern, the number 2, Jeremy Redfern, another one, So at least we have that, but it's not much, Granted, in the context of Trump being coordinated and again being the candidate and democracy again being on the line. Not that it wouldn't have been if DeSantis was the nominee. So, well, I'd like to see him flame out. I like to see him flame out another. He's not even a 2028 candidate. I'd like to see him go into the argument. I don't know. Did you see the interview they did? I think it was Good Morning America. This just came out. I don't think you tweeted it, but somebody did. And it showed him and Casey talking. And she goes, that's where she gave the bit about how when she had cancer, he picked up the kids with humility. and people focused on that Handmaid's Tale kind of focus. But if you really, I loved
I love the body language of those two. I don't know why. I'm just obsessed with like their interactions because she's so weird, right? And she says this and she does these like tears, and then she reaches and he's like, oh yeah. And the reporter kind of gets in and is like, oh wow, that's really sad. How does that make, like trying to give him, human feelings. And then if you watch carefully, it took her like 6 times. She like reaches for his hand, like puts her hand on his leg, and he's like doesn't notice. So finally she like reaches in and grabs his hand, and drags his hand over. Like it's like there's a cue, like a robot, like have feelings. It's just it is. I mean, I guess I do take a perverse pleasure of watching the whole thing. Because you said Pushaw early on came after me when I was Lincoln Project guy still. Her guy, Jeremy Redfern, who I guess is still technically a state employee, he's an Army vet. So he likes to play Mr. Tough Guy veteran and stuff. And it's just, so I do take a very deep and perverse pleasure seeing DeSantis implode. And we are seeing that. I mean, I think New Hampshire poll just came out that he's tied with Chris Christie.
Yeah, I know.
Which is... Just chef's kiss.
And tied, not tied at like 20%, tied at like 8%.
Single digits.
And Trump is at like 50. So I mean that's game over right there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just we're gonna see this kind of drag out for like 6 months, obviously. But I mean, no one has any traction other than Trump, and I don't really see that changing. I mean, I guess like in theory, someone like a Glenn Youngkin, Brian Kemp has kind of ruled it out already, but I mean, I guess you could see a Youngkin. Youngkin has nothing to lose because he can only do 1 term in Virginia anyway. So like, why not? But he's not it's going to be the same problem with him. Like he's not going to go after Trump.
He'll get destroyed by Trump. And he's got such a paper thin resume. I mean, the thing about Youngkin is he got elected by Jeff Rowe, which is the same. It's interesting, they share a strategist. The guy, that's why they share the blue vest. The vest thing is Jeff Rowe, right? Yeah. And for those who don't know who Jeff Rowe is, you should Google him because he's an amazingly horrible person, but he's a big he's the number 1 strategist in the Republican Party now, thanks to the many, many evil things he's done. But he's the guy kind of got Youngkin elected, and that he's DeSantis is the PAC guy. And that's why we laugh when we see DeSantis wearing the vest. It's like, oh yeah, he's got one move. You know what? We're failing. Get him a vest.
No, he was because he was at it was some event. It was like midday because I actually kind of live clipped that one. This was I think like last Friday possibly. It was recently. And it was like, because I'm up here in Minnesota. So, I mean, a little bit north of Iowa, and it was like 90 here. And, so even hotter there.
Right.
And he's got the jeans with like the, kind of like work boots on and the long sleeve with the vest. Like, who dresses like that?
Who dresses this guy? Well, it's all Casey.
Yeah, it is, because I mean, there's kind of, I'm actually reading, I just started reading it, Garrett Graff, who maybe, I don't know if you follow him on Twitter, but he's got a recent, it's from last year, but a new history of Watergate out. And I'm very early into the book, but like he kind of sets up the book talking about how unlikely it was that Nixon became like this towering figure of the 20th century because he was so impersonal and was very awkward and like didn't really, his whole thing was that he had a very tight circle of advisors because he didn't want to interact with people.
Right.
And so he kind of had, he had the three Germans, Kissinger and then Ehrlichman and Haldeman, who were like his whole time in office were like his 3 main advisors. And he wanted to deal with them because he didn't want to deal with other people. And so the point simply being that there is a long history, this idea that you have to be super extroverted to be a successful politician doesn't always hold true. Obama wasn't necessarily the greatest retail politician either. Obviously, Biden has that skill, and Trump, in a weird way, like Trump does have kind of a weird charisma to him. He's not really a retail politician, but I mean, even yesterday, because I'm sure you saw some of the tweets. He was wet, like he was
soaking. I know, just soaking.
Like, absolutely. I mean, it looked like he was running a marathon with a suit on, but like his face was wet,
soaking.
But I mean, at least he was up there saying, "Oh, I'm sweating like a dog. We got to wrap this up."
Yeah,
and, people.
I look terrible.
He has that ability to laugh at himself that people find kind of relatable. I think. And DeSantis clearly does not because he's wearing the lifts and all that.
Well, he's not funny. He doesn't, and that's the thing we talk about a lot. Where the difference of DeSantis went the bully part. He thinks the bully part is where he loves, but also Trump is also into. And I always get Please don't leave all the negative comments in the video, folks. I love you to death, but I'm going to say something that makes you mad every week when I say it. Trump actually has a certain charisma, and he's funny to certain people. And if you can just listen to the crowd and the reaction, he does have a power. And you know who was the guest, Matt? We had John Nichols. Was it John Nichols? I don't remember. We had a guest on who talked about how Trump's bit really is. He's kind of like the old comedians from the Adirondack. He's got that the caustic humor comedians of the old days, the 60s and 70s. Who did the routines, and his routine is that kind of like you said. All the nicknames and all that stuff. That's his bit, and there's people that appeals to. By the way, a lot of boomers love that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And DeSantis is not funny. I know that sounds stupid, but it
so
does matter. He's not
like,
funny. He's terrible.
Well, and and Fox and Newsmax will try to carry some of his speeches. Like they'll cut in, here, let's cut in. And then 2 minutes later, they're done because it's like, and that's Ron DeSantis because there's just nothing happening.
It's boring.
It's just not, and so granted, they don't really take the Trump speeches either, mainly because they're so long and rambling that like they're kind of ratings. Yeah. They're not good for ratings either. Like people, they discovered that during the Trump presidency where, they reliably for a period of time would take his rallies and broadcast them. So I would oftentimes clip the Fox News feed when I was live tweeting his rallies. Yeah. But then at a certain point, they figured out that like an original episode of Tucker like doubled the ratings of them showing the Trump rally because they were just, he's dissembling. They're like 90 minutes long. And so they don't really take his rallies anymore either. But with DeSantis, it's like they try, and it's like, it's just too boring. He just doesn't really have the juice. And, he was really the only person I think in the field who had a shot to give Trump, a run for his money. So, I think you're right that like, some of them are probably waiting for like a major medical event, possibly. Right. I think the prison thing is less likely because I don't think we're going to see all of the legal stuff play out. Because
that's what he's doing. He's running the clock out. Right, that's what he's good at.
Right. And I think even I'm not enough of a legal expert. I've seen a lot of, I don't even think legal experts really know because, the rulings haven't been made yet in terms of scheduling. Like we did have the scheduling of the documents trial for May of next year. But that could be delayed even further because usually, when these trials get scheduled, it's kind of a placeholder. And then especially on the defense side, you can delay things even further if there's issues surrounding evidence that's going to be in the trial. Yep. And the evidence is very complicated in that case because there's classified documents involved and all that stuff. Yep. So that, now with the other trial, I'm not sure if it'll be scheduled before then or not, but it just seems unlikely that it's all going to wrap up before the trial. So the prison is kind of off the table. I think so. I guess you still have like the medical event possibility, but I mean, let's face it, like Trump's going to live to be like 100. I mean, does anybody really doubt that? I mean, like, even when he got COVID and was sick, it was like, he'll be okay. And he just kind of has that era of like, his parents lived to be like 100, right? Yeah. So 2 words,
Rupert Murdoch. He's freaking in his 90s. Still terrible, still marrying young women. I mean, it's like, these guys live forever. It's like, it's horrifying, frankly. But I think so too. And I do. I think my friend Jeff Timmer says it well. He goes, there's only 2 things that will stop Trump from being the nominee is a jail cell and aorta. And I'm not sure if either of those are in the, I like I said, I do believe he will be he'll be the Republican nominee without question. And I do agree with you in the end that, and I was, again, going back to my Lincoln Project experience, our goal was to get the 4 to 6%, 3, 4, 6% of Republican voters that voted for him the first time, not to vote for him the second time. I just don't see a scenario where those same people will say, oh, you know what, now he's been indicted 4 times, I'm totally going back to him. It's like the reasons they left have not only not changed, they've actually gotten worse. So,
I think that's right. And I also think that, if you go back when Biden's approval really started sliding, like late 21, there were a number of circumstances that contributed to that. But I think probably one of the foremost was economic conditions. Right. Deteriorating. I mean, we had inflation. It was mainly inflation, right? Because the job record has been solid from day one of the Biden administration. But, inflation is a big deal for people because it feels like their money doesn't go as far. So especially if you're kind of, in a tight income. But now that's, that's gotten better recently. Like the job stuff is still really solid. Like, economists are saying that there's no recession on the horizon now. So like if you're one of those people who wanted to hold your nose and say, well, we need to cut taxes or whatever, even that's kind of gone away, where I feel like it's pretty hard to push back on the idea that Biden hasn't done a pretty good job economically, especially when you compare the COVID recovery to other comparable countries. Yeah. So like, even that, and I think that you're right. That it's kind of an underrated thing about the 2020 election, where I think, a big factor was that there was that thin slice of Republicans who may have voted for Trump in 2016, but then, turned away from him. Especially in some of those swing states, people who are like, Lincoln Project fans or Bulwark fans. Yeah. And to me, it seems like, when the economy wasn't doing so well, that maybe gave those people an excuse to consider voting for Trump again. I feel like maybe that reason isn't as available now as it would have been, a year ago, let's say. So, yeah, I mean, hopefully it seems like, but then you look at the polling and it's like they're tied, but granted, we're a long way up, but it's
so
always
early.
kind of like,
I tell people not to worry. It's August, it's August of a non-election year. People aren't paying attention. I mean, look at the donations. I mean, I ran a super PAC for a while there, and August, especially August, is like where it really bottoms out, people caring in the non-election year. And then you'll start seeing September come up. And I think that's actually where we should stop for another sponsor break, because we have some great sponsors. Do you know your temperature at night can have one of the greatest impacts on your sleep quality? If you wake up too hot or too cold, like I do often, I really recommend you try out Miracle Made sheets. Inspired by NASA, Miracle Made uses silver-infused fabrics and makes temperature-regulating bedding so you can sleep the perfect temperature all night long. Now, that silver-infused fabric means that Miracle Made sheets are thermoregulating and designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long, so you get a better night's sleep. And I can tell you honestly, I have. Now, the silver fusion technology also adds an extra benefit. It means the sheets prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them cleaner and fresher 3 times longer than normal sheets. There's no more gross odors from your sheets. You don't have to worry about any problems with bacteria. They just last longer. Now, I've been sleeping with these sheets, and they're seriously comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands, and they feel as nice, if not nicer, than the bed sheets used by some 5-star hotels. Stop sleeping on bacteria. Bacteria clogs your pores, causes breakouts and acne, a whole bunch of problems. Sleep better, sleep clean with Miracle. Now, go try miracle.com/Fred. That's go to trymiracle.com/Fred to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use that promo code Fred at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. So Miracle Made is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Now, upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/Fred and use the code Fred to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40%. Again, that's trymiracle.com/Fred. Treat yourself. I love the products. I've been using them myself and sleeping like a baby. Let's stop cutting down trees to make toilet paper. I mean, it's true. Humans are cutting down tens of thousands every day just to supply the American need for toilet paper. And the worst part is that when you use trees for toilet paper, it's just one use and done. It can't be reused or recycled. It just goes straight into our water system. That's why I made the switch to real paper. Real is 100% bamboo. So we're using a plant that grows fast, can be harvested and regenerated like grass on a lawn, and doesn't impact entire ecosystems of forest. Real is the best kind of eco-friendly product because it doesn't feel like you're sacrificing something to help the earth. In fact, honestly, it feels like an upgrade. I'm really busy these days, so it's great to have it shipped free to my door in a plastic-free packaging. And I can schedule it on a subscription so that it comes exactly when I need it. And y'all, I'm super forgetful, as anyone who knows me knows, so I don't have to worry about picking it up at the store where I always forget. I'm a bit of an environmentalist myself too, so I love that Real is now a partner with One Tree Planted. And with every box of Real that you buy, they're funding reforestation efforts across the country. So unlike other toilet paper products that cuts down trees, Real is actually helping to plant trees. Now, Real paper is available in easy, hassle-free subscriptions or for one-time purchases on their website. All orders are conveniently delivered to your door with free shipping and 100% recyclable, plastic-free packaging. Now, if you head to realpaper.com/Fred, sign up for a subscription using my code Fred at the checkout, you'll automatically get 30% off your first order and free shipping. So that's REELPAPER.com/Fred, or just enter the promo code Fred. Get 30% off your first order plus free shipping. Let's make a change for good this year. Switch to Real paper. Real is paper for the planet. We kind of picking up where we left off. It is, we're starting to see the movement for it. And the last time we had an election, of course, was last cycle was the, I remember sitting here on the show after we lost the House. And I think I got negative comments on that one too, Matt, when I said, it's going to be a complete shit show and we don't have to worry about it. and I said, and people, Matt remembers, and I got a lot of negative comments. I was like, look, I hate the fact we lost the House. I do, with every fiber of my being. But another part of me feels like this is an opportunity for us to show, in the easiest way possible. There's 3 branches of government. Obviously, there's a Republican Supreme Court, but giving them the House and letting them go absolutely effing insane in the House is a great way for, if I was a messenger guy, which I am, by the way, just constantly saying, See, you know, I mean, I said the other day, I don't know if I saw on Twitter, Chip Roy, I guess, wants to defund DOJ and DHS to show. I was like, go for it, dude. You should totally do that. I want you to spend all your time in the next 6 months trying to defund the Department of Justice, and if that's what you want to hang your hat. So, I mean, this clown show. I mean, some of the stuff coming out of this house is insane. I mean, I know you. You know.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, it's been kind of a cottage industry just clipping some of these hearings, especially oversight.
Oh yeah,
with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Boebert and Gates. It's like the trifecta are all on that committee. So those are always, you know, they make for good clips at least. But yeah, I mean, and you know what, like the main tent of the circus is still to come here, because, you know, they're coming back in September and they're going to do impeachment 100%, because, you know, the idea is that this is kind of like a rear guard defense of Trump, where it's like, okay, well, you know, they impeached him twice. Let's cheapen impeachment by impeaching Biden, and let's, you know, Trump's going to be on trial. Let's try and kind of both sides the corruption thing. By, you know, spending months kind of trying to, you know, tar Biden as corrupt, even though there's no evidence implicating him. You know, obviously Hunter has his own issues and whatever, but like, you notice even I pointed this out yesterday or a couple of days ago on Twitter, because McCarthy has been tweeting about this more and more.
Yeah.
And he had one the other day where he said something about like Biden family corruption. And that's the tell right there. I mean, they have nothing on the president. Like, sure. I mean, you know, there's a certain obviously shamelessness in trying to make a big issue out of cashing in on your family name coming on the heels of the Trump era. But like, that's what they're going for. I'm not saying that that's okay, but like, you know, if Hunter committed crimes, then he should be prosecuted. And they had a plea deal where he was going to plead guilty to tax and gun crimes. Right. But anyway, yeah, I mean, so the worst of it is still to come in a sense, because we're going to have this impeachment. I mean, you know, there's certain members of the House. Actually, it was Mark Green, a senator, who was on Maria Bartiromo's show today. And Maria was actually pushing, like, they want to do like a 2-for-1 impeachment, getting Mayorkas and Biden at the same time. You know, it's just beyond. But like, I think you're right that people shouldn't really be worried about it, because, you know, this has been kind of the pattern of these House hearings, whether it's the Twitter files, you know, some of the broader weaponization stuff that they've been talking about. Yeah, they bring in these witnesses and it just completely backfires, because you have people like Goldman, Debbie Wasserman Schultz has been really effective. You know, these Democrats come prepared and with really good lines of questioning that kind of expose, you know, these hearings for what they are. And so granted, like, it doesn't matter what happens at these hearings, Fox, Newsmax, they're going to run with the narrative of it's devastating for Biden, right? You know, that they will chop up, you know, they'll find the 30-second clip or soundbite that, you know, of a Republican really going after one of the witnesses, or, you know, pounding on the table kind of thing. But that's going to happen regardless. Yeah. And I just think that I don't really, I mean, I wonder how that kind of plays in terms of like your swing voters. Right. My sense is that doesn't play well. But, you know, I guess that's the idea of these Republicans, is like, if we can get, you know, even a small segment of the middle voters believing that Biden is just as corrupt as Trump, then we're doing our job kind of thing. Right. But I mean, these hearings are going to be, the impeachment drive is going to be a complete circus. And that's what they're going to do right when they come back in September. So buckle up for that.
Just as we start primary season, you know, just as we start, you know, thinking about it. I mean, I think, again, you want to do that while we think, they think it's an advantage to do this during the election cycle. I would argue it just gives us, people like us, especially like you, who professional clip these guys, it gives us fodder for what our counter argument, which is like, this is the madness you're signing up for. Had they passed any bills? They had a 10-point agenda. None of them have passed. None of their things have made law, right? They haven't made any laws. Basically, they're just wasting our money and our time on this stupidity. And I'm happy to litigate that. I mean,
ironically, the one law that and there probably have been a few, but like the debt ceiling, where like, you know, they didn't really get any concessions from Biden whatsoever. No. That was, you know, and that, you know, leads, you know, that makes me wonder with, you know, like the government shutdown stuff that we're going to have this fall as well. Like, you know, if McCarthy is going to have to kind of play ball more with the fringe than he did that last time to keep his job. And, you know, that could be really bad, obviously, for the country if there's a protracted shutdown, something like that. Yeah. But, you know, maybe impeachment is the bone that he throws to them. I mean, I've actually been kind of surprised how out front McCarthy has been on the impeachment stuff, because, you know, one way that he could play it would be kind of just like, well, you know, that's the Judiciary Committee's responsibility. I don't want to get involved with that. But no, he's out there saying like, yeah, we need to have an impeachment inquiry. Yeah. You know, he gets mad at reporters if they say he supports impeachment, because he wants to kind of split hairs and say, no, I'm only supporting the inquiry.
Yes.
We'll go where the facts lead, sort of thing. Of course, you know, they'll make up the facts as they go. But yeah, I mean, he's really out front on that. And I wonder if that's kind of trying to keep, you know, that fringe on side with him, so he doesn't face a vote to vacate the chair and lose his job. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this fall it's going to be crazy. And you're right that like there hasn't been any real legislating.
No,
that'd be tough anyway, just given obviously the divided government.
Yeah.
And I do wonder if there was some sort of like big crisis that needed addressing, some sort of like stimulus legislation. I mean, maybe you could cobble together a coalition of Democrats and kind of moderate Republicans in the House and then get it through the Senate as well. Thankfully, we haven't really been faced with that since Republicans took the House. And I guess it would have been January of this year, right? So, but yeah, I mean, other than kind of, it's a circus, and beyond that, there's not a whole lot of substance to what's going on in the House these days. And the Senate, meanwhile, is like doing nothing. I mean,
you got Tuberville. I mean, the
Right,
Senate, the Senate's being quiet, but you got the Tuberville stuff. I don't know if you saw it. VoteVets came out with a poll, I think today, showing that 58%. They ran a poll in Alabama, and 58% of Alabama poll participants are against what Tuberville's doing. It was interesting too because it's really fascinating. If you can get a chance to look at it, it's fascinating when you break it down. First of all, like 58% of the participants in the survey were Trump voters, which was great. But they're like, look, we've politicized the military. And then that goes to the NDAA, which was just so outrageous. I've talked about on the show before where, you added, Lauren Boebert got a book ban in Dodea schools. Abigail Spanberger and I laughed about that. She doesn't call it Dodea. She calls it DODEA. It's like, oh, F. But Dodea, which is the education department there, she got book bans. You got the transgender bans. You got the abortion bans. I mean, they packed the NDAA with political bullshit, and now you've got Tommy Tuberville now going on 6 months of sitting on military promotions. But in his own state, they are actually saying this is hurting national security at this point. That you've made your point. I mean, again, I'm happy to. Well, I hate it, but.
I had a piece that ran in my newsletter on Monday from David Lurie, who's an attorney. He's written for the Daily Beast. He's been on my podcast before, but he's very smart, and he was kind of linking the Tuberville stuff, which he called because McCarthy with the NDAA kind of got on board with a lot of the culture warring.
He did,
but he called it Kevin McCarthyism, because you can go back to Joe McCarthy and like what really led to his downfall was attacking the military. Like, of course, that was a previous form of culture warring, the whole Red Scare stuff. But like what really got him in trouble was when he tried to turn that against the military and insinuate that the military had been infiltrated by secret communists and all this stuff. And like the politics of that never really plays well, because the military is an institution that a broad range of Americans identify with, right? Because they have family members who have served, maybe they've served, people in their community. And so, when you start to kind of culture war against the troops, politically, there's a lot of risk in that. And, that's actually really fascinating. That would have been, I wish I would have seen that before this piece went live, because that would have been a really interesting kind of addition to kind of flesh that point out further, because he was kind of drawing more on the historical analogy.
Yeah.
But I mean, and Tuberville is absolutely resolute with it. I mean, he was on Newsmax today. I mean, showing no signs of wavering on the military promotion stuff. And so I know there are ways that Schumer could, kind of get around that. It would take a lot of Senate floor time and kind of gum up the works in a way that I'm not sure is really like realistic to do it that way. But it's similar, I guess, to kind of bring it full circle to what we started talking about at the beginning of the show with the abortion stuff, where this stuff with basically holding all these military promotions until they no longer pay for troops to have any sort of reproductive health care. I guess the Republican base loves that. I'm sure that they do. I mean, there's a segment, you said even in Alabama, it's not playing well with kind of your normal Republicans, but I guess it plays well on TV, and there's a certain segment of the base that likes that. But, when you kind of extrapolate that out to more national politics or try and nationalize these issues, it doesn't play well for Republicans. And so I guess we'll see. As you also mentioned, we're August of an off year. This could be kind of like forgotten a year from now. But, if Tuberville was in any other states, I think the races there could get interesting in light of what you were saying, how unpopular this is even in a deep red state. Yeah.
And I think it also shows, to me, I think it shows where McConnell is, right? We're looking at McConnell. There's a lot of talk about the old age. And maybe we should probably get wrapped up. McConnell's lost us. I mean, you saw the clips of him. I'm sure you did. You probably ran them of his getting booed at the speech in Kentucky. But it almost feels like, in a lot of ways, the old McConnell never would have allowed this to drag out like it has. A lot of my heart kind of feels like McConnell's definitely not where he was, and there's chum in the water, there's blood in the water that sharks like Tuberville and others kind of feel like they can do what they want. They're going to swim their own way, because it just seems. I think, McConnell, one of his things is he keeps his caucus very focused, and he keeps his caucus in line on the priorities they have. They're fine the NDAA right now, right? That should be the focus. Instead, almost every day it's Tuberville. So it does feel to me a little bit like we are seeing the how McConnell is his caucus is slipping through his fingers. Part of me is like, yay. Part of me is like, God, what comes next? I mean, I shudder to think what could be next, right? I mean, Tom Cotton or some other nut job. There's a lot of nut job center. It's easy you mentioned one of them earlier. What's it? Mark Wayne Mullen. Yeah. Holy shit, the people they elected last cycle. It's like, I actually forgot about how effed up some of these Republican senators they elected were. And, Jesus, Marsha Blackburn from, there are some really bad Republican senators. So a power struggle there will be really interesting to watch unfold. Perhaps that happens during election year,
Yeah. Well, right. And McConnell was able to, Rick Scott challenged him, right? But he was able to fend that off pretty easily. And so I'm not quite sure what would have changed since then, because that was just in January. But maybe it is. Yeah, you're right. I mean, him getting booed in Kentucky. That is
health
really
scare that freeze he had the other day. I mean, it just feels like
the freeze. Yeah, I mean that kind of came and went. Where and I get it. I mean, he's not the president. Had that been Biden.
Yeah. Oh my God.
I mean, I think Hannity.
Could you imagine?
Hannity would still be anchoring special coverage like a week later.
I mean, oh my God.
Analyzing it frame by frame to see. They'd have Ronnie Jackson on there breaking down the footage, right? Frame by frame. But that's not it just kind of came and went. And, I know. And Republicans really, the ones who went on TV, like Langford from Oklahoma was on, and he was basically saying, it's up to the voters in Kentucky. He was like, well, I saw him after that, and he was fine. He answered questions. He seems like he's fine, but it's like, is he fine?
Is he? That's why I think the proof is more in the lack of things. I mean, we talk about a lot. We talk about, and I think it's a great place to end this. The thing we talk a lot about with the Fox industrial, the MAGA industrial complex, it's not so much what they talk about. That's a big part of it. But I think a lot of people miss, and like in this case with McConnell's health, is what we don't talk about. Right. They don't talk about those things. There's a large swath of our population that is not receiving information that guide information, which is kind of fun about the Newsmax, OAN, Fox fight, because they are kind of trying to outdo each other. But there's a large swath of our country that doesn't see information that is necessary like that. And thus, well, that's where people like you come in. I appreciate that. The truth telling and you do it's great work. I mean, like I said, I'm a super fan, and you've been great to me when I reach out to you for help. So I really appreciate that, especially. So
yeah.
I think
me on the show.
Yeah, man, it's great. So tell people where they can find you, because
absolutely. Well, I'm on pretty much every platform imaginable these days.
Yes, you are.
At AT Rupar. On Threads, I believe I'm Aaron.Rupar, which is kind of annoying, but AT Rupar was poached somewhere along the way.
Of course.
And then if you go to publicnotice.co, that is the home of my newsletter. I'd love it if you signed up as a paid subscriber, but even free ones really help the cause. And these days I'm running a lot of interesting freelance work from people like Liz Dye and David Lurie, Noah Berlatsky, Thor Benson, Lisa Needham, who's an attorney who writes about legal stuff and is really smart. So it's become more of a team thing.
Love it.
As I've gotten more and more into it, which has been really fun to kind of work as more of like an editor publisher than a writer, but I still contribute to the newsletter too. So that's where you can find all my work, and I really appreciate you having me on the podcast. It was a really fun discussion.
And Aaron Rupar Show on YouTube, and all your favorite
Aaron Rupar Show as well. It's that's kind of part of my it's
part of the whole complex.
It's part of my newsletter. It's always my newsletter. So I never think of like plugging it separately, but Aaron Rupar Show on YouTube, please sign up there too. That's free. So
all right, do it, folks. Do it, fan. Man, Aaron, thanks so much. Keep up the fight, man. We appreciate you. I hope your hair grows back.
Thanks so much.
Man, what a great conversation. We covered a lot, but I really want to do with Aaron. We haven't done that in a while. We've had a guest. We just kind of hit every darn thing going on in the world, but Aaron brings so much to the table as far as his knowledge. I definitely want you to check out his newsletter. I am a paid subscriber. I recommend the same, just as you should be a paid subscriber of our newsletter, fpwellman.substack. We'd love to have you there. Circling back to something we did cover briefly during the conversation is this Ohio election. And I do want to kind of get how significant that was. There have been 5 special elections since Dobbs was passed, which was the disaster that is the abortion ruling. And Democrats have overperformed by an average of 7 points compared to their 2020 election results, which means there is a movement. And I'll show you a chart here at the end here where a Gallup came out with a fascinating poll and you got to see this. And I'm going to have you look really careful at the end there. Gallup says that it shows what's happened. And you look at that bump in 2022. So when the Dobbs decision came down, people had to pick a side. I think a lot of Americans had been sitting on the sidelines. It was okay to say, look, I disagree with Roe v. Wade, but it's the law of the land, blah, blah, blah. And then when it actually no longer became the law of the land, I think a lot of people have been sort of fence sitters had to make a choice. And that's what you see. 55% of Americans now identify themselves as pro-choice, and the number of pro-life has gone down all the way down to 39. That's significant, folks. And that tells you, and I've read some great newsletters on Substack from some smart people saying, hey, this is an issue. That's what Janet Protasiewicz ran in Wisconsin on. That's what this issue number one was really about. They tried to frame it as something else, but it really was about access to abortion care. Here in Missouri, the Republican Party is fighting tooth and nail to keep an abortion referendum off the ballot. They've done everything from the Attorney General going way beyond his legal limits to try and say that the state treasurer underestimated the cost of the election and what the cost. I'm not shitting you guys. The Attorney General of Missouri, Andrew Bailey, who by the way was never elected, was appointed when the other guy made the Senate. This guy actually had the audacity to say that by allowing abortion in the state, it would hurt the economy of Missouri in the future because they'd have less people to work. And therefore, he wanted them to bake in to the cost of a abortion amendment vote the future cost of less Missourians because of abortion. Right? I want you to think about that for a second. What he's saying is these babies they also worship are future employees. This is the same time you got Arkansas rolling back child labor laws. I mean, this is their idea of saving the children. Like, there's not going to be enough people for us to put into our factories. The insanity of it is mind-boggling, but that's the desperation we're up against. So I guess the lesson from all of that, you saw it win, you saw the win in Wisconsin, you saw the win in Kentucky, you saw the win in Kansas, now Ohio. That is an issue. And if Democrats embrace it, Democrats embrace being the pro-choice organization, embrace saying that this is about women's health care and the freedom to choose in the United States. You can't have it both ways. You can't say we're a party of less government and freedom and at the same time tell you, oh no, but we're going to tell you exactly what happens between you and your doctor. It doesn't matter. And of course, we know they're immune to shame and immune to hypocrisy. But I know. I feel strongly about that. I want to bring that up again, so we brought it up. As always, great show this week. I really appreciate you being here. As always, if you want to check out what we're doing, again, with the Ohio thing, my partners at Blue Ohio, David Pepper, who's a former guest of the show, was a big part of fighting back on issue one. We're at Forgotten Democrats. If you check out ForgottenDemocrats.org, you can text Fred to 33777 and find out more about what I'm doing. Our goal is to help elect more Democrats to Congress by starting from the bottom up. Those races that didn't get funding, those races that are ignored, 126 races that raised only an average of $71,000. Those are the forgotten Democrats that need your help. And our model allows that money that you give to forgotten Democrats to be broken evenly among those nominees and give them money that they need. And that's what I'm really proud to be a part of, because it's not just about, we're not going to run ads. We're not going to run hit pieces. The goal is to actually help Democrats. I hope you'll join. As always, we're coming to you from Half Coast Studios here in Creve Coeur, Missouri. Our partners who've been great to us this whole time, owned by VIE Media, VIE.media. You should definitely check them out for your digital marketing needs. Find us at FP Wellman on Twitter, FP Wellman Official on Instagram and Threads. I'm having a great time in Threads, by the way. As always, you can find the podcast on Democracy Podcast on YouTube, on Democracy Pod on Twitter. We'd love you to subscribe to all of our different channels, even our YouTube channel. I'm going to tell you a little secret. Okay, we're going to tell a secret. Don't tell anybody I told you this. If you subscribe to On Democracy Podcast on YouTube, you get the podcast a whole day early. I know it's cool. But like, share, leave a good review, leave a comment. I love reading your replies on the MeidasTouch Network. Please leave more. We love hearing from you. Thanks again to our wonderful sponsors that keep this show going. I love having them and being able to provide this information to you. And again, we will see you next week. Keep up the fight.